Hello and welcome. Well, the week saw a series of Taliban and ISIS terror attacks across restive parts of South Asia, Pakistan and Afghanistan, and the re-emergence of Islamist terror in Indonesia. ISIS extending its reach into Southeast Asia, and the Taliban doesn't seem to want peace in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Now, the US President Barack Obama, he delivered his last State of the Union address. It was widely welcomed, and his rating after that speech went up to the 2013 levels at 53%. It should help the Democratic candidate to pledge continuity as a policy direction. This is World Connect, your weekly window to the world, a global picture of our times. Let's set the ball rolling then with the focus of the show. Indonesia foils an IS serial attack with minimum casualties as the world watches with concern the spread of so-called Caliphate soldiers. Taliban resists peace efforts in Afpak, attacks in Quetta and Jalalabad. US President Barack Obama delivers his last State of the Union address. In an election year, the speech gives much food for thought to his successor in office with regard to gun control and healthcare. In what seemed like a Hollywood script, drug lord El Chapo is arrested 6 months after his daring escape from a Mexican prison through a tunnel, ironically after an interview to Hollywood actor Sean Penn. Rock and roll legend David Bowie dies, leaving the world with over 50 years of incredible music that defied and defined genres and their times, from pop, funk, rock and roll, and new wave to neoclassical. And struggling refugees who fled oppression in Congo are making music in Malawi. The Tresor Ngzinguwe, the slam poet musician, is inspiring a new way of life in refugee music camps. Monday, 51 people killed by Islamic State in Baghdad, but that's close to its sphere of influence. Wednesday, 15 killed in Quetta by a Taliban suicide bomber close to a polio camp. The same day, Afghan forces engaged with Taliban terrorists in Jalalabad outside the Pakistan consulate. Thursday, an attempted audacious Paris-like attack in Jakarta by so-called soldiers of the Caliphate is largely thwarted, but it leaves an impact. These attacks just tell us that terror has no borders.
Thursday saw what many analysts believe was an announcement by ISIS of its presence in Southeast Asia. It looked like a failed attempt at a much bigger plot, but in a series of suicide attacks, 2 civilians, an Indonesian and a Canadian, were killed, besides the 5 suicide attackers, and 26 people were wounded. The drama played out on the streets and on television screens, with at least 6 explosions and a gunfight in a movie theater. The first suicide bomb went off at about 10:50 a.m. at Starbucks in an area close to the diplomatic enclave and several restaurants frequented by tourists. The customers fled for safety while 2 terrorists outside opened fire, killing the Canadian and wounding another person. Around that time, 2 other suicide bombers hit a traffic police post nearby, killing an Indonesian man. Minutes later, some policemen were attacked by the remaining 2 terrorists using homemade bombs. An exchange of fire lasted 15 minutes and ended with both terrorists killed. The IS, while claiming responsibility, called the attackers soldiers of the Caliphate. The attacks resemble the Paris attacks in modus operandi, but the much lower casualty rate made it evident the attackers were not as well trained. Nonetheless, the attacks raised the question of what kind of local support IS ideology enjoys in the most populous Muslim nation in the world. Indonesia is not new to Islamist terror. Jemaah Islamiyah has conducted a series of attacks in the early part of the 21st century targeting tourist resorts and business districts. The most deadly were the attack on the tourist district of Kuta, Bali in October 2002, killing 202 people, including 88 Australians, and injuring 240 more. The day before the Indonesian attacks, a suicide attack on a polio vaccination center in southwest Pakistan on Wednesday killed 15 people, mainly police officers gathered to escort health workers. The bombing on the outskirts of Quetta killed 13 police officers, a soldier and a civilian, and wounded 23. The same day, Wednesday, saw Afghan security forces exchange fire with terrorists barricaded in a house near the Pakistan consulate in Jalalabad. The attacks in these restive parts of Pakistan and Afghanistan come amid renewed efforts to restart peace talks with the Taliban and ease diplomatic tension between India and Pakistan. Delegates from Afghanistan, Pakistan, China and the US met this week to find ways to end nearly 15 years of bloodshed in Afghanistan. At the talks, Pakistan is reported to have agreed to cease financial support to Taliban fighters in Quetta and Peshawar.
Starvation is a weapon of war. That's what the UN accused Syria of descending to. Israel continues to use an iron hand in dealing with the Palestinians. China rejects objection by Vietnam as well as the Philippines to its flights over South China Sea. Our brief stories as we glimpse through the rest of Asia.
Food and UN aid reached starving people of Madaya and two other besieged Syrian towns this week, days after heart-wrenching images of those affected by famine went viral. United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon lambasted countries' warring parties for the crisis, saying the use of starvation as a weapon of war was a war crime. Israeli troops killed a knife-wielding Palestinian assailant in the occupied West Bank on Thursday. The killing was the latest in the months-long spate of street violence. Stabbings and shootings by Palestinians targeting Israelis have been fueled in various parts as a result of frustration at failed statehood talks and dispute over Jerusalem holy site. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has termed as stupid the Swedish call for investigation into killing of Palestinians. China has rejected objections raised by Vietnam and Philippines on Beijing's recent test flights in South China Sea. It said that flights were matters within its sovereignty and were completely in line with international law. Beijing landed 3 flights on the Yingshu Reef last week, triggering criticism and complaints from Vietnam. Protesters stormed streets in Azerbaijan following a steep increase in food prices as a result of faltering national currency. People demanded fair prices for essentials as they staged protests in the region of Fuzuli. Police used tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse protesters in Syazan. Azerbaijan's economy is heavily dependent on oil. Oil prices have slumped by 70% in the past 15 months. Several protesters were detained.
Falling oil prices have resulted in oil companies across the world laying off workers. One estimate says that over 250,000 jobs have been lost in the sector, and that made the Dow Jones drop more than 500 points on Friday. But moving on, here's a story about a very special student, the only passenger at the Hokkaido rural station in Japan, and she and her station, they are about to become a part of history. This is the unique story of the last woman standing, at least at the station.
The Kyushirataki train station in Japan is not a usual one where rushing passengers are a common sight with busy schedule of trains. The station in the northern Japanese island of Hokkaido every day welcomes only one train which comes twice a day for just one passenger. 18-year-old Kana Hirada is the only passenger who boards the train to go to her school. Even the timings of the train have been adjusted according to her school timings. This station was built by the locals around 1955 for the very purpose of sending their children to school. Many locals, including Harada's father Kichiro, removed snow from the platform in temperatures that fall to minus 20 degrees Celsius so that the lone student can travel to school. Harada will graduate high school in March and the service will discontinue with that, which makes her sad.
3年間ずっとこう汽車の乗り降りをして
I got on and off this train for the last 3 years, and the station's presence has become something I have taken for granted. I do feel sad to think it will disappear.
っていう思いはあります。
The station is much more than a mere building for many locals, and they have their memories attached to it.
成長する過程の大事なとこ大事なと
I remember getting on the train from this platform at an important time in my development, and I am getting very emotional about it. I'm glad we had this station here.
小工場があってよかったなと。
Harada will soon become one of the many youth of rural Japan who leave the countryside for a more exciting life in the city with more jobs. By March, the lonely station will only be a memory that passengers on the Shihoku main line will see fleeting by as the train speeds on to the next destination.
Joaquim El Chepo Guzman is no ordinary drug lord. He is considered the most powerful drug trafficker in the world by the US Department of Treasury and has also been rated among the most powerful people in the world by Forbes. And he's in the news 6 months after his daring escape from a prison. Rearrested, ironically, after a secret interview with the Hollywood actor Sean Penn.
A pre-dawn raid. Mexican Marines barge into a house, firing as they make their way from one room to the other. 6 suspects arrested, 5 killed, but the man they were searching for has already escaped. After all, he isn't called the Lord of the Tunnel for no reason. All these years, as the reigning king in the drug world, being chased and captured multiple times, escaping is an art Joaquim El Chapo Guzman has mastered. This time, Chapo slipped through a sewer system with his right-hand man, El Cholo. The hide-and-seek, however, couldn't last long. After hours of chase, mission was accomplished. The most wanted man was detained in Los Mochis in northern Sinaloa 6 months after an audacious escape that had left the Mexican government red-faced. The success came following El Chapo's extraordinary meeting and interview with Hollywood star Sean Penn, one that had been marred in controversy ever since it surfaced. American actress Kate Del Castello, who reportedly brokered the meet, has also landed herself in a soup. Mexican authorities say they have intercepted a series of chats between the actress and the drug lord, an obsession which led to his fall. From a humble background to the world's most notorious drug kingpin, an estimated fortune worth $1 billion, a star, a muse, drugs and the chase, El Chapo's story has everything needed for a crime thriller. Born in 1957, Chapo began his career in the world of crime working for powerful drug lord Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. His rise was swift. In the 80s, he set up his own cartel, the Sinaloa. After narrowly escaping assassination by a rival gang, he was arrested on Mexico's border with Guatemala and sentenced to 20 years jail in 1993. He managed to escape in 2001. He was again captured in Mazatlan after hiding in tunnels for days in 2014. In 2015, he managed to escape yet again from Ano's top security prison through a tunnel he dug in his cell, leaving the government embarrassed. The process of extradition to the United States has begun, but the fear of a third-time escape has kept the Mexican authorities on toes. The security has been beefed up, including reducing the number of inmates, doubling the number of cameras on the site, and moving Guzman randomly without warning to different parts of the prison to prevent him from digging his way to freedom yet again.
This was his last State of the Union address, and it left many analysts debating about his legacy. This is the last year of the US President Barack Obama, and some are already looking at how or even whether his successor will carry forward some part of his legacy.
Our unique strengths as a nation, our optimism and work ethic, our spirit of discovery, our diversity, our commitment to rule of law. These things give us everything we need to ensure prosperity and security for generations to come. In fact, it's in that spirit that we have made progress these past 7 years.
He painted a hopeful and a positive portrait of America under his leadership as President Barack Obama delivered his final State of the Union address. With the election coming up in November, Obama made a case for his legacy with a clear message that don't elect a Republican. He also used the opportunity to slam the anti-Muslim rhetoric by Republican candidates.
When politicians insult Muslims, whether abroad or our fellow citizens, when a mosque is vandalized or a kid is called names, that doesn't make us safer. That's not telling it like it is. It's just wrong. It diminishes us in the eyes of the world. It makes it harder to achieve our goals. It betrays who we are as a country.
Slamming the idea of comparing the fight against Islamic State to World War III, President Obama said that over-the-top claims is like playing into the hands of militant group. The seventh and last State of the Union address of the first ever African-American president was a microcosm of his entire presidency. A major portion of the speech was focused on his list of achievements. He also expressed regret over his own role in Washington's political dysfunction and lambasted Republican presidential candidates who he said are adding to the trouble. Unimpressed with the address, the Republicans slammed it, saying it represented Obama administration's failures and pledging that they would do better.
In one of the deadliest attacks on Germans abroad in years, 10 Germans were killed in a suicide bombing in Istanbul on Tuesday. A suicide bomber, identified as a member of Islamic State, who had entered Turkey as a refugee from Syria, blew himself up among tourists visiting some of Istanbul's most popular attractions. Turkey detained over 60 suspects, including 3 Russians, in connection with the bombing in Sultanahmet Square, and more than 20 others were held for allegedly preparing for the attacks in Turkey, reportedly some of them Syrians. Sierra Leone confirmed a death from Ebola hours after the World Health Organization declared an end to the deadly virus outbreak in West Africa. The country was declared free of the virus on the 7th of November last year, and the region as a whole was cleared when Liberia was pronounced Ebola-free on Thursday. Guinea was also declared Ebola-free last year. The Ebola outbreak has killed more than 11,300 people since 2013, in the world's deadliest epidemic in recent times. And while we transition to the glitz of show buzz, here's a brief of what else is making news across the globe. He was his own man, but then so are most rock stars, colorful, defining their own styles in music and fashion. But David Bowie did it across various genres of music and for more than 50 years. His death was mourned by millions of his fans, including those in space. After all, it was his song, Space Oddity, in 1969, coinciding with the moon landing, that gave music a feel for his space.
Lock your Soyuz hatch and put your helmet on.
6, commencing countdown, engines on. 3, 2, check ignition, and may God's love be with you. Fighting in the dance hall. Oh man, look at those gay men go. While color lights up your face. Let's wait. Oh, I'll be free.
The Oscar nominations are out, and they don't seem to be that different from the Golden Globes. The Revenant is the frontrunner with 12 nominations, and the last movie to win 11 Oscars was The Lord of the Rings way back in 2003, and before that it was The Titanic.
Leonardo DiCaprio's starrer, The Revenant, emerged as the frontrunner with maximum nominations. The film earned nods in 12 categories, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor. DiCaprio has been nominated 4 times before but is yet to win an Academy Award. The Revenant, a biographical survival epic set in 1823, Montana and South Dakota, bagged 3 awards at the last week's Golden Globe Awards. Mad Max Fury Road was at the second spot by scoring 10 nominations, including Best Picture and a Best Director nod for George Miller. Other films which made it to the Best Picture category are Spotlight, The Big Short, Bridge of Spies, Brooklyn, The Martian and Room. For the Best Actor title, Leonardo faces competition from Eddie Redmayne, who is hoping to repeat his 2015 success. Redmayne secured a nod for his role as a transgender pioneer, Lily Elbe, in The Danish Girl. Veteran British actress Charlotte Rampling, who has received a nod for marital drama 45 Years, faces competition in the Best Actress category from Cate Blanchett for Carol. Lesbian romantic drama Carol returned empty-handed from Golden Globes despite being nominated in 5 categories. The nominations for the 88th Academy Awards also triggered a controversy, with some saying that the nominations were too white, while others slammed it for a lack of diversity. Activists slammed the nominations for not having even a single black acting contender and no woman nominated in the Best Directing or Best Screenplay categories. The Oscars are chosen by the 6,000 members of the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and will be handed out on February 28th.
Bringing the cosmology of their religion to life. Well, that's what many believe the Gedong Buddhist festival is all about. And it has tradition, color and respect for one's ancestors.
In brilliant shades of pink and blue, hundreds of Tibetan Buddhist devotees gather for the Gedong festival. Masked, costumed monks portrayed a host of ghosts and deities from the pantheon of Tibetan Buddhist mythology. The sounds of lamas playing traditional instruments, crashing cymbals, drums and deep, vibrating ceremonial horns, all this define the Gedong festival of Tibet. Thousands of meters above sea level, high on the Tibetan plateau, hundreds of Tibetan devotees gather for the event. The festival is celebrated in the precincts of the Ganden Samtsaling Monastery in Shangri-La annually. The monastery that hosts the festival was built in 17th century and is often called Little Potala for its resemblance to Lhasa's iconic palace. Devotees from the region attend the festival to worship and also to witness the religious mask dances, the charm dance, performed by the monks. Many believe the festival is an opportunity to pay respects to deities as well as departed ancestors. For many, the event was a way of bringing the cosmology of their religion to life. Locals believe that charm dance is a reminder of the existence of the deities. The festival is a colorful display of the ancient and rich heritage of the Tibetan culture, which they have successfully preserved for ages.
And finally, what can you do when your freedom is suppressed and you are by nature expressive? Well, the former slam poet Tresor Nzingu has a unique way, and it's therapeutic as well, and it's catching on.
Imagine one day a bomb falls on your palace and creates a bloodbath all around. Will you accept to stay and die, or choose to flee to stay alive?
What would you have done when death came knocking? Chosen to stay or to flee? The question Tresor Nzingu raises in one of his talks reflects the trauma millions in the world face today. Music and poetry is a passion Tresor followed from an early age. But it was a song on peace that he performed at a local concert in his hometown in Democratic Republic of Congo that caught the attention of authorities. The country that has had an infamous past and continues to grapple with political turmoil has forced millions out of their homes. With his life constantly under threat, Tresor at the age of 25 fled to Malawi in 2008. and became one of the over 20,000 refugees who took asylum in Malawi's Dzaleka refugee camp. Not being allowed to work or even leave the camp without necessary permission, as is the law for refugees, Tresor slipped into depression. It took him over 6 months to come to terms with reality and look for a way forward. He revived his music career and today is a known face in Malawi's music and poetry scenes. Being a refugee, moving out of the comforts of home, being at the mercy of others, and living in uncertainty is not a choice one likes to make, but a circumstance one is pushed into.
No one can't choose to become a refugee. You see a refugee, don't be bad with that person because anyone can become one at any time.
This brings us to the end of this edition of World Connect. Do send us your feedback. You can write to us. Our email ID is worldconnect@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook. But before we go, let's leave you with these images of spectators in London. They are enjoying their favorite landmarks. They are transformed by light in the first ever Lumiere London Festival. Enjoy this. Take a look.